My question is, was Jesus ever sick? Was he ever sick? What do you think, David?
Don't know, but it wasn't important because it wasn't recorded in Scripture.
Wasn't it?
I would say that the nearest you get to is where Jesus wept. But you don't hear it, and you hear about him going off into the hills at times by himself. But you don't actually hear of him being sick with an illness.
So he wasn't there.
I've said what I believe.
Throw the toilet roll to someone else, mate.
Lynn? Yeah, I love it. Leave it there, Lynn. No, don't clear it up. This is the mess that we create. Don't worry, Grace. Grace, leave it. Leave it. Grace, you're not getting it. Don't. You're ruining the groom. Grace, leave it.
All right.
Can I have that, G? So, the reason I'm leaving that, Grace, and I've got the toilet roll, is because we had a mildly awkward moment.
Yeah.
So we made a little bit of a mess, which then made you chuck the ball over there, because it got a bit awkward.
Yeah.
So the mess staying there would be a better visual representation. So if we could keep the mess, that would be great. You can, but does that tell you something about small
We'll
groups?
just leave that there as a significant.
Grace, when someone's making a mess in a small group, do you feel like you then need to clear it up?
Yes, I do.
Exactly. Well, there's something to think about. There's a little bit. We're not in a messiness right now that is bad. We're in a messiness that's going to cause a conversation at the moment. So I don't know, because I think Pamela's got some good thoughts. I know Lynn's got something to say. But who would think something different to David?
What about Gethsemane?
Who?
Gethsemane.
Yeah. What do you want this? David? Oh, sorry, I've done it a bit sideways. What about?
What about in the Garden of Gethsemane when Jesus was really suffering?
Yeah.
That would be my thought.
Yeah. So you think he could have been sick?
Mentally anguished.
So just a mental sick. You think he was mentally sick?
I do think he would have been sick because he was 100% human as well as 100% God. So
Abby, I can't hear you.
Sorry, at one point he must have got sick. He was a child and he was a baby. He must have got colic or must have had, baby infections. They get bugs all the time because he was human. And I can't imagine him living a perfect physically life because he would have had to go through everything. It says he went through everything and he overcame everything, right, for us. If he went through everything, it means he must have gone through sickness too. At some point.
I just want to say that when David spread the awkwardness to me, the coffee messed up my heartbeat.
I feel like it complimented it personally, but he actually saved you donkey.
I'm recovering from my trauma.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. So, just a thought, when he was in, I think it's in Mark 9, and the disciples couldn't heal the boy, was he like, well, it's okay, some people are a little bit sick, that's life, or was he annoyed with them? I remember him being quite annoyed actually. He went, oh, you have little faith. He probably said that to himself when he had a cold. He went, oh, Jesus, you have little faith. You've got a cold. That's no problem.
Yeah, he was grieved at their lack of faith, I think.
Yeah. Because, but why was he grieved at their lack of faith? What could they have achieved with a better faith?
I don't know. No idea.
John knows.
No, the scenario that comes to my mind is Jesus of the well, with the woman. He was weary. I mean, how you define sickness, I don't know. Sometimes you get so weary that, you're sick. And he was pretty weary at that point. So I would say, yes, he did. He was sick.
But then he built that faith up by talking to her about God. And he said, my food's to the will of the Father. And then he turned down the food that came, didn't he? In that instance. Yeah, that's interesting. You got anything to add? No? Is it? Jay, have you got something? Oh, like you did. Oh, that's all right. We don't need the story.
Must be my
But
turn
yeah.
there. No, I'm joking.
Did my manhood. I think I sort of agree with Abby. I think he was 100% human, so I feel like he must have been sick at times.
Yeah.
But I think he must have gone through sickness, and maybe he did pray and was healed as well, and maybe it's not recorded because it's, I guess, not that important, I guess.
Yeah. So would that mean you're saying that God's will is that some people are sick sometimes?
No, I guess it's that we all go through stuff, but it's just because we know God and have a relationship with God doesn't mean we aren't going to encounter things in life.
Yeah.
I guess Jesus was able to deal with it because of his relationship with the Father,
Yeah.
and that's why I guess it's not recorded, because actually when he was sick, maybe he did pray and he was healed, and then it was never an issue that people saw because of his relationship.
Yeah.
Sorry. I do feel like God's will is never for us to be ill or to have anything that's not good, because he's a good father. He'll only give us good gifts.
Yeah.
But we live in a broken world. We live in a world as a consequence of what happened in the garden with Adam and Eve. And the consequences will fall on sickness and health and everything we do. It's a consequence rather than God's will. That's what
I would say when Jesus, after he gets baptized and goes into the wilderness, Satan tries to tempt him to get food, etc., because Jesus was starving whilst he was fasting, and so his body was weak. And so that's how his example to us is when we're feeling ill, when we're feeling like we have nothing left to give or do anything, then Satan kind of comes in. But then, of course, because he had scripture, he could fight that battle and the angels came. But because his body was weak, that's how Satan was like, oh, you should do this then, you should turn these stones to bread. So I think that's a good example of how Jesus' body could suffer physically.
Yeah. Just wondered, was there? Oh, did you have something?
I was going to say, in some ways the cross transfers, but may not be anything specific about Jesus' sickness, but the cross transfers because we know the agony and all the things that Jesus faced on the cross, and the stuff from Isaiah 53 about he was wounded for our transgressions and all those sorts of things, wounded, beaten, and all the horrific things that he faced on the cross. When we're facing any sickness, when we know Jesus understands.
I've got to commit, haven't I? You've got to lose a spleen if you want to stay in. John.
Go on. All of this is true, but to say that Jesus didn't suffer is obviously wrong.
Who said
suffering is not illness.
Yeah, I agree.
If Jesus suffered illness, it doesn't say so. So the answer to the question, unfortunately, we just don't know.
We don't know for sure, do we? Because we weren't there at every moment. Well, that's what the Bible would show us, wouldn't it? I was just trying to use his wider picture to try and get some understanding, because normally you're getting understanding, so I don't want to write it off and bypass it. But it's just an interesting question, isn't it? I think, was there anyone that was sick that Jesus saw and he was like, well, these things happen?
Well, there was the person being healed in the water, because he only healed one person amongst all the others that were sick.
Why do you think he only did one?
You go beyond the others. I think it's as much as to do with the faith of the person who wants to be healed as with healing. So I'm back onto the story. I've seen people who revel in their illness, and that brings them sense, and therefore they can't receive healing because they don't believe they want it.
Interesting.
And if you think about your example of the guy coming through the roof, well, Jesus says, your faith has made you well.
He does say that. A few times, doesn't he? David, your comments keep hurting people. Erica, did you have something? Because you've been through the ball.
I just think it can be pastorally quite dangerous to equate faith and healing in that way, which I'm speaking as a doctor. But I think there's thinking about things theologically, and then there's also the practical pastoral outworking, and sometimes those two don't match and can end up causing more harm, often unintentionally.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Right. Well, I'm going to disagree with you about the person receiving healing having faith, because I used to go out and do healing on the streets down in the Bear Pit, and a lot of them were homeless, and a lot of them were just people walking through. So most of them didn't have any faith. I always saw that God sort of put an anointing that I needed to go and speak to different people. So probably he might have been working on them or something. But the faith is the person who gives it. That's why Jesus got cross with his disciples, because he said, "You have little faith, this needs prayer," and things like that. So it's the person who does it. My hero is Robbie Dawkins from America, because he came down to New Wine once. And he goes out on the street and he prays for gang members and all sorts of things. They have no faith, but they still get healed. When we did, what was it, place we did with Andrew?
Day one.
Day one. And we used to go out, I used to take groups of, different churches used to take groups of young people out, and we go and pray for people on the street. We get them to do the praying. And,
So, Barb, what to do? Just interject you. You're telling me around the story that you're about to say.
Well,
so you're going to give an example inside of that scenario, but you're telling me about the scenario, not the story. You're about to share a story, so go straight to the story you're about to share.
But the story is that there were some kids in Yate, and one of them had broken his arm, and they prayed for him, and the next week when they went round where all these kids were hanging out, he said, my arm's got healed, and then the other kids were saying, "Can you pray for me about this, and can you pray for me about that?"
Yeah. Did you see how going straight to the story, not the backstory, had more power? Because we were more in. So go straight to the story, don't tell the back.
Well, there was 2 points. There was one...
No, I'm not talking about the 2 points. In your 2 points, you said, I've got something to share, which had a story connected to it. And then before you told us the story, which was, let's go to the second scenario, which was the boy with the arm.
Yeah, well, I thought that at the time.
But Bob, you started telling us about, here's the name of what it's called, I was with these people, we used to, on a Wednesday, you didn't say it, but you went round, and you just needed to go straight into that middle bit. And you got me? Just give me it. And then
but the thing in Yate didn't come until I was, the healing on the street was the first thought.
But are you getting what I'm saying?
Yate didn't even enter my mind.
But you're... Guy with the arm was the key. That was the bit that was going to capture us all. So if you'd have done that in 25, you'd have captured us.
Yeah, but I hadn't thought of it.
Okay, that's a different. So I'm just trying to make those stories more potent, because stories bring groups alive. But if you can make your stories potent to the point, it really brings them alive. My days. So go to the middle of the story. Yeah, absolutely. So I actually think Erica said a great point pastorally, but then I actually think that David was really brave to say something that you don't hear said in churches very often.
Sorry, we can't hear Erica.
So Erica said that when you start talking about the person's faith causing them to be well, there's a massive pastoral sensitivity and danger in doing that, because then obviously you've then got someone sick and they feel like it's on them, and that's pastorally put them in a difficult position. And then what I'm saying is I'm glad David said it, because in English churches you don't hear people preach that Jesus said on many occasions, "It is your faith that's healed you. Go away." He doesn't even pray for them on those occasions. So what I want to do is I don't want to neglect Erica's point about being practically pastoral, but I don't want to be so hooked on discretion, which is a God of England, discretion and comfort, that I therefore avoid what Jesus actually says. Because he did say that lots, and it did make a difference. So when he was in Nazareth, it says he could not heal many because of their lack of faith. I don't want to discredit the word because it will offend someone, But I also want to think about what else is going on here. There's got to be a little bit extra. Here's how I get out of that. I do think there's something in you having faith and make yourself well. I do think that, just being honest, and you can disagree with me. That's just my standpoint. But when I'm praying for someone, if it doesn't work, I put a high responsibility on myself because of that story in Mark when he says, come on, more's possible than you're living out. And so if someone doesn't get healed, I say sorry from my point of view, not theirs. Because I know that Lazarus had zero faith because he was dead. So it's possible for them to be well, and in Nazareth it says Jesus couldn't heal many, apart from a few that he put his hands on. So what that's telling us is hysterical faith causing mass healing, which is like, shadow, I touched his thing, those types of healings dried up. But when he was imparting the faith by the laying on of hands, he was still able to see even the unbelievers healed. Does that make sense? So you can put it back on you as the prayer, and you can be big enough to know that God is graceful and you can handle that. That he's not annoyed, he's just like getting there. And even if he is annoyed with you, he's not writing you off. Because where the disciples written off, he got annoyed with them. He did. He thought they should have been able to do more. You don't want to like hide the hard bits of your faith. Go on, Lynn.
I'm fascinated by the substance of what we're talking about. I'm also interested in the dynamic of what's just gone on.
Yeah.
Because it's just wonderful, I think, that David, not only spilling my coffee,
Forgive.
He's not there.
he's also hit the doctor at the back of the head. and then Erica said something, and I was longing to hear a bit more about why she said that.
Yeah.
But I'd love to have come, I didn't know what to do with that because I couldn't. But I wanted to hear more about what you were saying, and I thought it was a really interesting point.
Yeah.
But I couldn't. So that's just the dynamic of what was going on. I just shared that with you.
That's a great reading of it, Lynn. It's a beautiful reading of it. And was there anything extra you wanted to add, Erica? You don't have to, but...
Should I stand up?
I see what you mean.
No, so I'm a doctor. I treat people with cancer. Part of the reason I do that is my mother died of cancer when I was a teenager. My mother was a very, very faithful Christian. Nothing to do with her faith, that she died of her cancer. But she was healed because she utterly and totally believed in Jesus, in God, and in salvation. And so for me, healing is far wider than a physical change. It's not that physical change doesn't happen, because I believe it does, and when I've been to churches in India, you see it in reality all the time, that even someone who's trained in medicine has to admit. And it does, I think, very much speak to that difference between English church and middle class comfort, and what you can see with in different locations. But there is, for me, always a kind of, you have to go deeper than talking just about faith equaling healing and what you mean by healing and the transformation that can bring, and not just stay on a level of physical healing, because I actually believe it's much, much more exciting than that. If that helps.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it just gives that kind of like reality to what we're talking about, how big a subject it is. It is no joke. What I do want though is, I'm aware in our culture often you have scales of where we lean. Medical healing, plus the theological view there of it's wider than just this. Mind, body, spirit, like we talked about earlier. In Isaiah 53, it talks about he bore our sins, our transgressions, our peace. He got our peace, so he's talking about that mental side as well. All sorts of things were connected. He actually rekindled our relationship with God. which is the ultimate of healings, isn't it, to be born again? That is the number one goer. So I think it is smart to separate it. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to lose the edginess of Jesus. And I want to say, if he was in the room, what would be going on? If he was there. Now it's very bold to say that, because we might not live that out in the same way. We might not be able to. But I don't want to lose that factor. I would very much guess in those Indian churches, they were way more likely to preach a more Pentecostal-styled healing gospel. And do they see more than we do? Yeah. Which one do you want? The problem with that one is it's more offensive and pastorally risky. Difficult. What do you want? This is how I do it. I hold a personal view and I live that out in a really high convicting way, but I don't necessarily splash it about. If the results are good, people will ask me, and then I'm in a position to share. Probably not smart to be splashing what I think out there too much, so I don't do that at this point. That's just my personal stance on it. But it's a great question, isn't it? Was Jesus ever sick? Guys, thanks. That was a great conversation. I feel like we heard a really decent spectrum of views. Just wanted to say what I did at the end there. Kept us edgy. If you are in Pentecostal churches, you are more likely, as the leader, to have to lean on what Erica was doing. She was bringing that more pastoral, think about the human and the stories behind these people's side. That is what you would have to do. That's just a statistical thing because of the theology that they lean on, which is, so if you said, I'm sick, they would go, no, you're not. That's what they say to you. You go, but my arm is falling off. It hasn't. It has, Don't speak that openly. I don't receive that. And by his stripes you are healed. You were healed, It says in Isaiah 53, by his stripes. And then in Matthew 8, it says, by his stripes they were healed. And then it says in that little bit in Matthew 8 that Jesus then healed every single person in his presence. And then it moves over here to Peter and it says, by his stripes we are healed. Past tense, so you're fine. That's what you would be dealing with. And I've seen that, people get really dogged and a bit mean. And it is not good. And then they start saying, you haven't got faith. And the reason they do that is if there's someone in their group who's sick, it's seen as a blemish on their group. Do you get me? So now they are the untouchable. Are you even saved if you're sick? That could be the extreme that it goes to. We are probably not in those groups. Probably. I don't know everyone. I'm just saying that you're probably in mild charismatic churches. Mild evangelical charismatic, if you wanted to look it up. Which means you have a mild version of conservative Christianity that believes that maybe God might do some miracles. That's your church. Have I done a decent? Is that fair? Yeah. Enough that you feel expectant, but not enough that anything really happens.
My church hasn't even got to the charismatic.
Has it not? Yeah. So you're just. I think he's here.
I've actually had to say, well, what do you mean Jesus is just coming back again?
Well, this is it. So I'm just finishing it by going, know your audience and know where they need to be pulled to. So you guys probably need to be pulled to have a bit more faith. You do. I know that because I know your culture and your vibe and your churches, and I know what you would theologically say. We really need to unpack that. We need to, both families, we need to have balance when we speak, because we need to have wisdom, don't we, when we handle these things. And we need to really be careful how we handle these things. Let me just unpack what that person was saying. How are we going to feel like we really talked about something meaningful, enough that makes us feel convicted and good about ourselves, but not enough that makes us feel challenged? Because at the end of the day, someone will cry and leave the church and then send an email about me. But we really did feel like we talked about it, so I look like a discipleship legend, but no one really was challenged. That's actually what's going on. And the undercuts of we've got to be wise. Because I know your churches a little bit. I know what they say to get out. So I'm trying to take that out. But you can't go from here to here. You can just go there sometimes. And you just move them. Great. So that was really good. And I just wanted to put it as an example. I know that you guys actually are probably like small group experts to some way, so actually you were very good at doing that. Because that was a touchy subject that could have got way more heated. Someone could have got really annoyed with someone with that subject, and that's why I picked it. There were a few more that we were going to cover, but that's fine. And please take what I said at the end there. You're not just looking to bring peace. You're looking to bring a sword and you're looking to bring peace. And you've got to work out when to what. Be humble when you get it wrong. Think, oh, I did go too far. I didn't think about the people in the room and it was a bit too edgy. And then other times think, oh, come on. We haven't seen someone saved in years. I don't know the last time I saw someone got healed. The Bible seems to say that's what should be going on. What the heck am I doing? You know? Jesus does say it's about your faith. Oh, I don't like that. You know, I've been in a pub and someone who was a pastor's kid, I was having a similar conversation, and I said, well, it does kind of say it. She was like, what? And I was like, well, I'll just like read it to you. So I literally got a Bible, and I was like, right here it says, by your faith, it's made you well. And then she was like, well, I don't agree with Jesus then. So I just use healing because it's a good subject to do it in. Anyway, let's move on. David, I think I'm pretty much on a landing place here. I've given you guys some bridge links to get into conversations, out of conversations, deal with some people that, you know, help people deal with their stuff, and you do that. I've given you some ways that people with different perspectives can live in the same place being honoured, but actually then there's still an openness on top of it. So the honouring is honouring the bravery or the vulnerability or the honesty, and there's the connection points underneath. But on top of that, it's like, well, actually what you're saying is quite big, let's keep it open. Ways to get out of there and say, let's do this another time, that's not what we're talking about right now. Whatever it might be, you're going to need them. But the reason you're going to need them is you're going to run good groups that talk about the harder stuff, and you get practical and you do stuff. And you're going to come back with stories and someone's going to have told you to F off down the street. Or at work, you share with someone about faith and now you feel a bit awkward about going into work because they will think you're a weirdo. That could happen. How are you going to deal with these things? How are you going to help people grow, and how are you helping be overtaken by the spirit of the age and what that looks like in England? David, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Steve. We're going to have a very quick break now. We need to make a loose stop, and then we're going to come back for our last session. And before we have our last session, we're going to just share a little bit about our project. So, thank you so much, Steve. I think the example of our discussion hopefully was real. It's a sort of, but hopefully it's building skills for us and giving us ideas about how to respond to issues. So thank you so much, Steve, and please stay on and have lunch with us and don't run away. I'm sure that people have questions to ask you over lunch.
I can stay for a tiny bit. I've just got a Brazilian person's birthday party.
Get up your 1 for hours.
I know. Yeah, that's actually really true. I got to know.
So if you need to take a quick break, please do it now.